This is Authentic.
Welcome back to another episode of the Test Pilot series. I am your host, Sunshine Sinclair. Today, we're going to pivot from the Super Hornet and explore weapons test, specifically air-to-surface weapons carried by the Rhino. As one can imagine, weapons tests can go through the same three stages of test as aircraft: developmental, integrated, and operational testing. I have invited another Pennsylvanian, retired Navy Lieutenant Commander Dan TOFU Price, to talk about NavAir testing in general, then focus on weapon developmental test. We will anchor on the AGM-154C1 Joint Standoff Weapon, or JSOW-C1, as he did a great job of keeping me out of trouble when we flew some evaluation flights together. A graduate of Purdue in aero and astronautical engineering with a minor in physics, TOFU went on to become an electronic countermeasures officer, or ECMO, in the illustrious EA-6B Prowler, and saw some combat action before attending the Navy's test pilot school. He also received a master's in aerospace engineering from the Air Force Institute of Technology, or AFIT. TOFU really understands all the beeps and squeaks of NavAir testing, but why don't I let him tell you all about it? So let's get to it. How you doing, TOFU?
Doing good. Thanks for having me on, Shine. I really appreciate it. Really honored to be here.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I'm glad you agreed to do this. So when we started thinking about the series and how we're going to work through this, I know you were an obvious choice because you and I had some very fantastic opportunities to fly together as we were testing the JSOW-C1.
Yeah, we had some good adventures.
Good adventures indeed. So before we get too much into it, Dan, I want to explain to the listeners your background. So obviously very technically oriented. You went to Purdue, you got your aerospace engineering Bachelor of Science degree, and then you went off and you went to the Navy Test Pilot School. And at that time, we had something called the co-op program where you get both get fully immersed, we'll call it, in academics as well as the operational side. So you actually, as the co-op program, went off to the Air Force Institute of Technology and got your aerospace engineering master's degree, correct?
That's correct. Yep.
Okay.
And the final project at TPS counts as your master's thesis. And so it's the big tie. It kind of brings it all together, full circle.
Fantastic. So is it a 2-for-1 deal? Is it still a year program for the co-op and TPS?
It was a year and a half at AFIT for the backseaters such as myself. It was a year for the pilots because they go off and you have to do all your, at that time it was T2 training, you have T38. So there was another 6 months. So it allowed us to do some other stuff at the school. So I did a bunch of system engineering courses and picked up some other stuff. But yeah, and then you go off to TPS for a year. And then at the conclusion, you have both your TPS cert and your degree.
Fantastic, man. What a great way to do it. Now, also backing up a little bit. So you went through flight school. Obviously, you selected for Prowlers, right, which would be the predecessor to the Growler. And you have a little over 1,800 hours in type. Is that right?
1,800 hours total on all my different aircraft. I'd have to look up specifically how much I had in the Prowler. Probably just under 1,000. Okay,
and then you said total time, if you will. So how many different types of aircraft have you flown?
26 different airplanes.
26 different. Okay, and how many traps do you have?
173 traps.
173 traps, 26 types of aircraft in your 20 years. And do you have any combat experience?
Yeah, I've got about just around 86 hours of combat, a lot of it over in Iraq, Afghanistan. Did a little ONW, OSW, not to sound too old, but yeah, we got to play with those for a little bit. Yeah.
You and me both. So Operation Southern Watch is OSW, right?
Yeah.
So you're based.
Yeah. Sorry, acronyms.
No worries at all, dude. We're both going to be guilty of that, so we'll try to catch each other throughout this this interview. All right. So OSW, we're going to dive down a little bit into that. So in the Prowler, the EA-6B, what was your primary mission there for your combat ops in OSW?
At that point, it was mostly what we called ISR, Information Surveillance and Intelligence Surveillance Reconnaissance, ISR. So basically, we would just go up there. The Prowler is an amazing aircraft, and not just that it brings that airborne electronic perspective, it also is a great thing for electronic surveillance, ES. So we spent a lot of time kind of just flying over different areas, collecting up, seeing what was raiding, what wasn't, so you can kind of get a better idea of what's on the battlefield. So that ends up supporting, ground troops. It ends up supporting what you need to do, and it has both tactical and strategical impacts in decision making.
Nice. Okay, so while you're out there in the operational environment, at what point did you realize you wanted to be a test aircrew?
Actually, I wanted to be a test aircrew before I started that. Back, little Dan Price before I was TOFU. I wanted to be an astronaut when I grew up.
Fantastic.
So as I was looking at the things that you can do and kind of the history of people and how, what astronauts were and where they came from, that test pilot track was something that really intrigued me. And I got to admit it, I'm a little bit of a geek or a nerd.
Aren't we all?
So to be able to blend the tactical side of it with the technical side was something that seemed interesting to me. And then once I was in the test community and really saw the impact that it has in supporting the warfighter, and I know that becomes an overused term, especially in the world we live in, of, hey, go out there and support the warfighter. Those aren't just words. We really do have an impact on what goes out there to people that are flying even today. To have that meaning was something really kept me going through that whole acquisitions time.
I'm with you, TOFU. And before we get too far along here, so TOFU, so do please explain the origin, or at least the significance, of your call sign.
It's an acronym for tons of fun.
Tons of fun. Nice.
There's all types of stories of how it got to that point, but that's the long story short.
Okay, so that's the wave top executive summary, is tons of fun. So it's not that you're small, white, and boring or something like that.
Yeah, no, I'm not white, bland, and tasteless. No, I'm the other TOFU. I'm the tons of fun one.
Because we do have, so my academy roommate, Matt Gensley, right? He's the other TOFU, mm-hmm. And who knows why. But anyway, so we have two TOFUs. At least I have two TOFUs in my TOFUs. That was tough to say, in my circle of friends. So anyway, fantastic. Well, hey, I am totally with you, Dan. One of the most rewarding parts of for us VX31, right, the test experience, was not only translating the requirements for the operators, they understood what, but also, so that would be kind of the forward flow of stuff, but the back flow, or the feedback, really, right? The operators saying, hey, this is good or bad, and then taking that back to the engineers. So we were good at liaising, wouldn't you say, between the nav air engineers and the op-nav operators?
Yeah, it's the old joke from, what was it, Office Space, of I translate for the engineers. You can joke about it all you want, but that's the truth of the matter, is there's an intent behind a requirement. So by the time that a requirement goes through the whole process, and hey, we need to bring this capability to the fleet, be it a new weapon, be it a new detection system, whatever else. By the time you start going through that whole requirements process, there's plenty of opportunities to totally lose what you were trying to accomplish. And that's the translation of the requirements that we really did. We kept everybody focused, kept everybody remembering why we're doing what we're doing and what the purpose and intent of this specific thing that we're testing.
I agree. And I remember in uniform, in a flight suit, stepping into a room of engineers, and the amount of respect that was immediately paid to the person in a flight suit, especially if you have a test pilot graduate patch right on your sleeve. I mean, I don't see the two of us as very egotistical, but what I do see is it's a necessary requirement, right, for an operator to be able to step into a room and command the room, if you will, full of engineers to help them ensure that they're on the right path.
Yeah, and I think the other thing is culture is a huge thing in the test pilot community, and not the ones we see in the movies and everything else, but the culture of safely testing, the culture of working with different groups of people, contractors, government, engineers, finance, the program managers, the whole spectrum of folks, to bring those people together and coordinate it. That to me is the other part of it too. To be able to get a group of people together and figure out your roles, responsibilities, and figure out how to make that team work based off of everybody's idiosyncrasies, personalities, everything else, that becomes a whole skill set in there.
Awesome. Thanks, TOFU. And before we get into the nitty gritty of the JSOW C1 and its kind of lineage, its history, and then get into DT, let's open up the floor basically to the concept of developmental test versus operational test, and then the blend in between, that integrated test. So what exactly is the difference between DT, IT, and OT?
Let's start with the DT side of it first. When I was at VX23, that was my first project officer tour. Project officer is your basic first test pilot tour generally. Basically, you're going to come in and you're going to be assigned a specific project, capability, whatever else. That's kind of your ground job, and you'll be responsible for the planning, working with the program office on it, kind of doing the whole responsible engineer to get things done. You're working with a project engineer to make that all happen. It's an amazing team when you really get rolling into it. And anyway, point of the story being, so I'm this project officer. We're working on a project with the Prowler, and it was a software improvement project. And basically, every 6 months, they were giving us a drop. And if you found any issues, there really wasn't much you could do other than document it. And then when it was all complete, you came up with your long report. You said, these are all the things that are wrong with it. These are all the things that are good with it. And we think it's suitable for this particular mission. And then that goes up to a program management office, and they made a decision. Somewhere along the way, that changed. And I got to see that change as in my career. I find it kind of funny because by the time I made it to VX31, we were now the cheat sheet. So we went from being an independent test person that just does test on something to actually being part of the design process, to being brought in for, hey, what are the requirements that we're trying to get? What do we think of this answer? Do we think that this approach is going to work? And really working through it, and then doing the fly, fix, fly, where we would go ahead, get a drop, we take it out flying, and by flying, it could be in a sim, it could be on a computer model, it could be on a bunch of different things, find our issues and fix it.
When you're saying you got a drop, you're saying an updated software patch, or what do you mean by drop?
Yes, software, it could be a software patch, it could be a new piece of hardware. Maybe they fixed some hardware and they wanted to incorporate that into it. It could be a mix of different things depending on what you're doing. If in the Hornet, we were doing, everything was as what they called block upgrades, right? So you're getting new hardware and software at the same time. I've also done projects where it is just hardware, so you might get some new firmware. You need to test things out. So by a drop, it could be, hey, this is just something new that we need to see what we're doing. It's, the little baby steps that we're taking as we're trying to deliver our product.
Okay, and so you're ringing out the new software. So the term that comes to my mind anyway is regression testing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Making sure all the old functionality still works as well as the new functionality. So when you're out flying, have you ever had any kind of close calls where the software didn't perform as predicted and you were airborne and you got kind of painted into a corner?
No, I always lucked out. I was boring. But I say that, it was boring. That doesn't happen by chance. That happens from a methodical process, working with your engineers, saying, hey, this is what we need to do. This is how we're going to mitigate our risks, identifying what types of hazards are out there and making sure that we're meeting all those things. So have I had software completely break and things go completely wrong? Yeah, but it was always on the ground in the test. By the time we got that thing flying, we knew that it was safe for flight.
Awesome. So it sounds like what you're describing is basically a build-up approach, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So right straight from the textbook, if you will, build-up approach, you're going to start out with a lot of risk in the beginning, and then but you're going to try to mitigate or minimize that risk. And in your case, or in our cases, right, you test software in a lab first, then you plug it into the jet, try it on deck, right, and then eventually you get airborne with it.
Right. Now that process is going to be the same across DT, IT, and OT. And I'll explain those acronyms as we go along. I started with that story to explain developmental tests because I think it's really important to show that we became the cheat sheet. Developers realized we were resources to be tapped. I mean, we're the ones going to be testing it. So you might as well bring them in the design process and speed things up so you don't have to go back. Like I said, when I first started, if there were problems, it would be 4 years until you get it fixed. We had to wait until the whole acquisition process. By doing it where, we're in DT and we're getting incremental steps, we're able to take a look and give that immediate feedback. And, now it's just a couple weeks before we can get something fixed before it goes to the fleet. Now, before it goes to the fleet, a little bit of a misnomer. So DT, What we did was, from a technical perspective, we evaluated it and then said, hey, we think it's going to be suitable for this mission or for this particular task. What operational test does, operational test says, hey, we think that this is suitable and we think it's effective for a particular mission set. And the way they evaluate it is by going out and actually doing those tasks. And then they go back and they give their feedback. So you'll go through DT. DT makes a recommendation that, hey, yeah, this thing's ready for operational test or it's not. The program managers make their decisions of, yep, we agree, based off of the data we're seeing, we think it's ready to go this next level of test. They might accept some risks, they might not, and it goes off to the operational guys to do that next level of assessment. Well, again, they're the cheat sheet, right? So you know exactly what they're going to be testing, you know exactly what they're going to be looking for. Let's bring them into the process as well. And that's where integrated test comes in. So rather than waiting for, the thing to be completely done, you wait until it reaches a certain level of maturity. And then you say, okay, OT guys, let's bring you in and let's do this together. And OT and DT will do an integrated test, and it helps you speed it up and assess the product a little bit better.
Nice. So another way of, so thank you very much. Very eloquently explained and laid out. So DT, could one say that it basically is your making sure that the requirements are satisfied by the design, and then OT, you're taking said system under test and you're placing it in a more operationally representative environment to make sure that it has that, like you said, suitability and effectiveness?
Yeah, that's one way to look at it. I mean, it's weird. We can really start dissecting what it means to verify and validate something, right? And this becomes a whole nother conversation in itself and where that line is. But what DT's final tasking was to give a recommendation to the program office of, hey, we think that this is going to be good or not. What that good or not is defined is a very technical, yes, we're meeting specs, yes, we're meeting requirements, but also that the specs are appropriate. The requirements are appropriate. We designed the right thing. This is our opportunity to give that, and that becomes a huge risk mitigation for the program office.
Totally with you. So along those lines then, when it comes down to reporting to the decision makers, the sponsors, hey, it meets specs, or we'll call it the performance, I tend to think of the triad, right, of cost, performance, and schedule. Are there any politics that sometimes come into play when those three are being deliberated and like, hey, we got to get to this fleet. Well, it's not quite ready. Is there a lot of push and pull, or how does that traditionally work?
Again, I brought up that culture comment earlier, and first off, naval aviation as a culture is very unique in that, hey, if you screw up, yeah, you're going to get yelled at, but you admit to it. That's the culture that we have, because safety is paramount. Mitigating the risk, taking care of one another while airborne, accomplishing the mission, and learning from each other, right? Nobody's perfect. We're all going to make mistakes. We got to do that. So that's one unique culture. You now need to take that culture into the test world. And in the test world, that honest reporting is what's so important. DT is kind of, if you really want to start getting into it, is an independent advisor, right? We're funded through the program office to give an answer, but it's expected to be an independent, unbiased answer. We have to be objective. We have to give very clear answers. We have to justify and tie it into it, right? We can say, hey, this thing is broken. Okay, what does that mean? It's broken. It has a mission impact, and mission impact is something unique to developmental test. We then say, hey, this thing is broken, which means we won't be able to accomplish this, which then means this. This capability is broken. This thing needs to be fixed now. It can wait a little bit, whatever else. So that tie-in to the mission impact is another thing unique to developmental test and the inputs that we give into all that. So that honest reporting, being that independent, unbiased, objective actor, is extremely important. However, as a project officer, you get put into some weird positions because the program office wants it now, right? They have a schedule they need to keep. Schedule time is money. Product is money. Well, what do you mean I need to fix this? That's going to cost more money. I can't spend that money. That working that balance puts you into place. And as the project officer and the project engineer team, you have to give that honest report and just be like, hey, this is what it is. It's up to you to make the decision. We're going to fight for the warfighter. We're going to fight for the product, and the quality is our number one concern. But yeah, you're absolutely right. There's always that little nagging voice in the back of your head saying, dude, this is going to screw up the schedule, or hey, this is going to screw up the cost.
But you are definitely a proponent, we'll say, of performance as a project officer over cost and schedule. Is that a true statement?
Within the test, absolutely. That's your job within test. Now, I did end up in other positions where I was a program manager or a system engineer working on a program, but I was also a tester for those, right? We don't fly just one particular product. Every day we're flying. So we're flying something new every day. We're working across a whole portfolio of programs. Who knows what we're going to be flying from day to day? Things we may know something about, things we may not know anything about. So as a tester, you have to keep that in your mind. But as a program manager or a system engineer, yeah, performance isn't always my number one priority.
Okay, yeah, totally. So let's step back a little bit. So you mentioned program office, you mentioned project officer. Are these guys co-located? Is one a higher rank than the other? Do they talk every day? So let's take, for our example, JSAL C1. Where does the project officer reside? Is his office close to the program manager's office? How often do they talk? That kind of stuff.
All right. So when we talk about a program manager, I'm trying to think of how not to make this boring. All right. So Congress says, hey, somewhere along the way, the fleet says, hey, we need this new capability, right? The bad guys are doing this. We need this new capability. We need this new toy. And there's a dude called a requirements officer for each community, be it Prowlers, Growlers, Hornets, whatever, that then take that through the Pentagon and to Congress and say, hey, we need this thing funded. That funding then comes back through program offices. So everybody has a program office. There's an F-18 program office. There's a air-launched weapons program office, and they all have these weird, funky numbers that make no sense whatsoever. Now, these program offices are generally located in Patuxent River, Maryland for the Navy. The Air Force calls them SPOs, the Special Program Office, I think it is. They are responsible for the execution of that funding and to make sure that they're meeting what that requirements officer originally wanted. So the program office lays out the schedule. They say, this is when we need this thing delivered. This is how we're going to do it logistically. And then they kind of contract out to DT as a risk mitigation to give them an assessment. And then the operational test is generally, depending on the level of the project, right? You can have very small projects that are quick and easy and cheap. They may not get OT, but the big programs, they have to go to OT. So anyway, program office comes to DT and says, hey, I need you to do this. Now, generally, you're now a few layers down in the program office. You've got a team that is specifically stood up, an integrated product team or an IPT that stood up that will then reach out to the squadrons and will say, hey, I need you to do this. VX-23 in general does envelope expansion, stores, captive carry, carrier suitability, that type of stuff where you're actually talking about the airplane doing something in general. I'm generalizing here. They do a lot of mission system stuff too. VX-31 does the weapons test, does the mission systems test. So they'll contract out to whoever they want, contract out again in air quotes that nobody can see as I'm talking over just audio only. And they'll say, hey, we need you to evaluate this. At that point, depending on the program office and the size of the program, you're going to get different levels of working relationships. You'll get some IPTs that really want to be tied in with the testers. You'll get other ones that are like, yeah, just give me your answer at the end. You'll see a little bit of all. It's very personality driven. There are certain requirements you have to meet as part of the acquisitions process, but in general, you have some type of relationship where you're reporting on a regular basis of, hey, I've got this many more events to go. This is what we're going to do. Heck, even negotiating how many events you're going to fly, what you're testing, you're going to negotiate all that with the program office and with that IPT you're working with.
Okay, and like you said, so thank you for explaining the architecture, we'll call it. But then a lot of it, the maybe daily or frequent of some sort, let's say maybe monthly or semi-monthly, whatever, interactions are very personality dependent, wouldn't you say?
Unfortunately, yeah.
Yeah.
And the other thing is that the structure gets unique as well, right? So you have technical program offices to get thrown into the mess because yay, bureaucracy, right? And so you have this program office out in PAX on the East Coast, but they're doing all the mission tests out on the West Coast at China Lake. You want somebody a little more hands-on doing that technical work and doing the technical review. So not only will the program office contract with the test squadron, they'll reach out to this development organization, be it a TPO, a Tactical Program Office for a Weapon, or something like the Advanced Weapons Lab, AWL, which does all of the integration of the Hornet, right? So they're responsible for the technical development, and then the test is responsible for the test, and the squadron and those organizations work together. Again, even if we're co-located, sitting just a couple desks away, very personality driven into, hey, are we meeting every hour? Are we meeting every day, every 6 months?
I'm with you. And I think, though, in our case, I know you said, unfortunately, sometimes driven by personalities. I think you and I got really lucky because our deputy program manager from PMA 201, right from the project office, who was very focused on JSAL, was Messi, Sam Messer, right? Commander Sam Messer. Mm-hmm. Now, he and I were in S3s together, different squadrons, but flew the same plane. I knew him. He's also an academy guy. So basically, I think that we were able to use that, well, leverage maybe is a better word, leverage that working relationship that was already established to our benefit, that I could, if there's something weird on a report that was sent up, Messi could just call us or call me and say, like, hey, Sunshine, what's the deal here? You know, or get the skinny, if you will, straight from the guy in the trenches, we'll say. So I think it kind of worked out to our benefit, at least in the JSAL case.
Mm-hmm. And I was working on the mission planning too. So I had another program manager for that. God, I wish I could remember his name because he was a great dude. His call sign was Red. He was a P3 guy. So again, this shows the diverse, who knows who's going to be running what, right? Again, one of the idiosyncrasies of the Navy. He was fantastic because his mentality was, I trust you to do your job. You tell me your plan. We'll review your plan. I'll tell you if it's good or not, and we'll fix you. I'll let you go execute it, and then just let me know when things go wrong. And we had occasional checkups, but I had never met him before. This was something we were all rolling into. He was new to the program office too. He had a lot of acquisitions background, but he was a pleasure to work with. And I can confidently say work with rather than work for. Even though I am reporting to him, it did feel like a team type of growth.
Yeah, I'm with you, dude. Words matter, prepositions matter, and working for someone as opposed to working with someone just totally helps for me to discern a different type of relationship, working relationship, right? So I'm with you there. Cool. Okay, so we talked about DT, IT, OT, EIEIO, right? So let's roll into JSAL. So what is JSAL? Let's go all the way back. So JSAL, Joint Standoff Weapon, is a family of weapons. Do you mind talking a little to the A, the C, and then the C1?
Yeah, sure. Why not? Let's bring the electronic countermeasures officer. So again, I rolled into this job and I had no idea what I was doing. And I'll say that with a little bit of confidence and a little smirk to it. I didn't know what a kinetic weapon was. I launched HARM missiles, high-speed anti-radiation missile, right? These things honed in on radar sites that were radiating, and maybe they found something, maybe they didn't. It was kind of a hope and a prayer. That's a great weapon, but it was really interesting when you really get into what it can and can't do, and when to use it and when not to use it, because it's also a precautionary type of weapon. So you would send that thing downrange. The bad guys would hear you say Magnum, the code word, over the radio, and they'd be like, oh no, let's shut down. And from my perspective, I didn't care if it blew up or not. I just cared that the radar shut down or the comm system shut down or whatever. So I accomplished my mission just by saying a word. Not the same when it comes to kinetic weapons. So I'm rolling into a world I know nothing about. They're like, a widget's a widget. You'll figure it out. Cool. Thanks. So got to learn a little bit about the Joint Standoff Weapon, the JSAL, which it took me years, about 2.5 years, and I saw the patch that had a pig on it, and then I finally got the joke. I was like, oh, Sal, pig. It took me forever to realize just that part. All right. Anyway, point of the story being JSAL, Joint Standoff Weapon, glide type weapon. It's got some little wings that pop out, poof, when it's released from the weapon or from the air launched platform. And then the alpha, JSOW-A, that I think would go just directly to a point. You gave it some coordinates, and then it figured out, okay, this is what I need to do to get there. When you got into the C, now you're bringing in some imaging. So basically what you do is you load up some imagery before you went into the airplane on your mission planning. You'd build up some lines and kind of a wireframe that represented what it would be looking at. You loaded that into the weapon, and then you launched it, and it went looking for that wireframe and trying to match things up. So between the GPS coordinate, that information, and whatever else you're feeding it from the airplane, you had a better probability of hitting your target and being more effective. That's all great and wonderful for stationary targets, right? Buildings. Boats are a whole other story because those things move. Do I have to say ships? Can I say boats?
Dude, say boats. We're aircrew, man. They're boats.
Yeah, I wear brown boots. They're freaking boats. I have a couple of SWO friends, surface warfare officers, that we still keep in touch with, and every now and again, it's really funny because we'll be talking like, so I heard you were out on the boat for a few months, and dude, I can just hear the growl and I can feel the eyes bearing down on me.
Yes, total fly in the ointment. Yep, I'm with you, man. It's fun.
So anyway, JSOW C1 was meant for moving maritime targets, MMTs. We'll probably slip in an acronym here, but basically based off of a number of different information, you could use a JSOW to go ahead and find and target a moving track. The find, fix, track target, the F2T2, is another big acronym and a big capability that the Navy is always trying to improve on. And that's what JSOW C1 was all about. And it was about bringing that capability of, hey, I see something in the plane, because you've got great sensors in that plane. You've got great sensors in the other planes all around you saying, hey, there's something over here that needs to go bye-bye, and feed all that information together, get it into the weapon, and then let the weapon make some decisions so that the air crew is now freed up to do other tasks.
Perfect. Absolutely. So the A, and TOFU, did you know that, believe it or not, Texas Instruments Weapon Division won the contract for the JSOW-A? Texas Instruments, right? The old calculator company. Yeah. So then they did sell that off to Raytheon, and then Raytheon went on to develop the A, as you mentioned, and then the C, and then also the C1. So the A also, besides being a bomb on coordinate, right, it had those 145 minelets, right? So the Blue 97, it was called. And so basically it flies to an area, and then while still over the area, it actually disperses these. So it's a kind of cluster munition, right? Which is obviously very effective against soft targets in an open area, but no bueno, we'll say, post-war for civilians walking around, right? So they basically signed a bunch of accords, if you will, and these international accords. They said, nope, no more cluster munitions, right? So the Navy has stopped producing them, or really buying them, Raytheon has stopped producing them, and they'll be in our inventory for a little longer. The numbers being classified, but they're around, and we basically use them just for NCEA, right? Non-combat expenditure allocation. So it's practice, right? We all need our practice, our sets and reps. So the fleet will pretty much drop A's just to kind of get some training and readiness points. And then you brought up a good point about the imaging infrared seeker. And so, believe it or not, that technology was borrowed from General Motors. So back in the day, this is around 2000, early 2000, right? Cadillac had come out with a heads-up display that had a night vision camera. And so they used that technology to create the imaging infrared seekers you had said. So awesome point. And then moving on to the capability gap would be the moving maritime target, as you mentioned earlier. And great way, I loved how you explained of basically the target's moving, so you can't just have a coordinate and then hope that it opens its eye and finds it in a large area, right? So to me, there's weapon queuing and there's weapon guidance. And to me, queuing is going to be, I'm sending information to the bomb as it runs downrange without the eye opening, so it's just listening. And that would be this Link 16, this new capability, right, for the network-enabled weapon, as we call it. So to continue that analogy, so it's listening as it runs downrange to a certain point, and then it stops listening, it opens its eye, hopefully it finds the target, and then it schwacks the target, right? So TOFU, though, while the weapon is running downrange and it's got its ear open, or it's listening for queuing, if you will, can you talk a little about Link 16?
Yeah. So, like I said, each aircraft has its own specialities, right? So,
Specialities.
you
It's
know,
French.
the baby Hornet, which they're all gone, but the Super Hornet now, it's really good at bringing mass chaos and destruction, right? It brings things to
Indeed.
the fight. It's got a pretty capable radar. It's got some other pretty capable sensors, but you know what? The Growler, man, that thing's got some great sensors on it. There's the Air Force has a bunch of other aircraft, the RJs 135s, all these other ISR platforms that are up there listening and searching for things. A bunch of other things out there. The E2, of course, can't forget the mighty E2 doing its thing and looking and targeting things. Heck, even the 60 Romeo has some great capabilities to find all these targets. Well, that's all great, but you need to bring all that together to the person that can do something with that information. So the Link 16 network is a way to share information between aircraft automatically and without any voice done. It just happens automatically in the background for you. Of course, the operators set up exactly whatever settings they want and everything else. And this information and these messages, that's the key of the Link 16, is these different message sets and message types go across so you can get information and share that information and bring it to bear where you need.
So could nowadays we have with our 5G, cell network and the Internet of Things, could you say this was an early version of the Internet of Things where everybody's talking to each other, incorporating sensor data?
Yeah, it really is. Again, we can go real nerdy on this one.
Go for it.
If you, I'm trying to think if I can. Okay, so when you buy a phone, you can get a Verizon phone or an AT&T or a T-Mobile or heck even Mint Mobile, right?
Sure, a certain carrier. Yeah.
You get your certain carrier. You're limited to just their system because you're using their message sets, you're using their instructions, and they're using their technology. They're generally all CDMA. I forget what that stands for, but basically,
sorry, code division multiple access, right?
Yeah. So you're committed to that code type, and that's how it assigns who talks when and who listens when. With Link 16, it's all time based. It's TDMA. So you have time slots. So there are certain amounts of times that you're listening, and there are certain amounts of times that you're transmitting. And these information all come across. So it syncs everybody up to that based off of time and says, okay, it's time for these messages to go across to these type of airplanes, and then that information goes across like that.
So, and if you don't mind, so to make sure everyone doesn't talk on top of each other or step on transmissions, there's some kind of a governing document, right? So the JTIDs, we call it the network library, right? Mm-hmm. But now, and that's gonna be very important when we get into the testing of the JSOW, right? Okay, so let's fast forward to, we talked about JSOW. So now it's early 2000s. They come out with this idea that's going to fill in the maritime capability gap of moving maritime targets. The program starts, I'm going to say about 2006 to 2008, right? They had a technology demonstration, the JCTDS, or Joint Capability Technology Demonstration. And then from there, they said, yep, this is a concept that could work. Now let's put it into the JSOW and then let's test it. So now you and I come into, let's focus on you. Where did you come into the JSOW testing?
Yes, let's focus on me. I came in on two pieces on it. One, my job at the time was a system engineer working for the PMA 201 program office. That was who my official reporting senior was. But I was located at China Lake, and I was tied in with VX31. I had just left VX31, but I'm a body sitting there with lots of great qualifications. So, hey, let's use it. So I got to keep on flying. So when I came in, I started working some of that system engineering work on the mission planning for JSOW C1, which very quickly turned into mission planning for net-enabled weapons. That link, you talked about the JTIDs and the libraries, that's just for the integration with the Hornet. And we'll get to that in a minute because that's one part of the job. The interoperability is the other part of it. We talk about I integration and interoperability. Who all can be in part of this? How do all these things work together? Hey, how do we get the Hornet to implement this thing? Net-enabled weapons were a brand new thing. And they were trying to take lessons learned from the past where, we have MIL standards. We've got all these other documentations that are very restrictive that say, this is how you do things. So with net-enabled weapons, they called it the Chinese restaurant menu concept of, hey, we're going to come up with all these a la carte messages. So in order to use a net-enabled weapon, you implement a certain subset of these, and you can pick what you want. And that was meant to reduce the impact on programs. Let me explain that. When that funding comes down through a program office to do something, to do a capability, somebody has to pay for it. So the JSOW went through the air launch or the air-to-ground weapons PMA 201. They're responsible for executing the JSOW. 265, which was the PMA for the Hornet, is responsible for implementing all the capabilities and bringing it all together and integrating it on. So they both have very different funding pipelines. You end up in this stovepipe acquisitions where people are looking for different things. So the Chinese menu option was great for everybody because now PMA 201 developing JSOW could say, hey, we're going to implement this J11 message set. And then we'll just do the bare minimum on that. And in whatever program office needs to, they can implement whatever they need in their airplane. So they don't need to do the hundreds of messages that are possible. You just do the small set that you specifically need. But again, you're a stovepipe, so these programs need to talk to one another. And that becomes another great role for project officers. And in my position with mission planning, that became one of my roles as well of, hey, how do we make sure that this weapon works with the airplane, and this weapon also works with all the other airplanes out there to accomplish this mission.
Nice. So thank you very much for that explanation of Link 16. So we have these time slots where we can send out a certain set of predetermined or scripted, I guess we could call them commands, except for the lat long and velocity, obviously, of a target. So now, bear with me here. So we got this pie in the sky design. Hey, we're going to come up with, we got a weapon that already exists. We're not going to change the way it looks, the outer mold line or the shell. So the kinematics should be about the same, right? Except we'll have target updates and it might turn its course a little left or right or descend or climb or whatever. So, but roughly has the same kind of kinematics. So all we're going to do is throw a Link 16 radio into it and then add some additional software so it can react to those new messages and kind of change its course as necessary. Does it seem like it should be an easy problem to solve?
It is until you get into the stovepipe world. So yeah, you can do that all day for the weapon itself, right? And you can now say, hey, this weapon is able to do this, right? This weapon is now able to take queuing from somebody and say, hey, you know what? I'm going to go in and now I'm going to be able to destroy this target, right? It's all about, like you mentioned earlier, it's all about putting it into the basket. We need to get this into a general area, let it turn on its sensors and find the bad guys and then go and destroy them.
Okay, so if you can explain, what is a sensor basket again, please?
So don't really know how much to share, but there's some type of sensor on the front of the JSOW C1 that's looking for the boats. That has a certain vision area, right? Like if I'm looking, I have a certain amount of peripheral vision. So I have to turn my head to the left if I want to see my wife sneaking up on me, right? With JSOW, it's the same thing. You've got a weapon going downrange. It's looking straight ahead. It's got a certain field of view. We call that the sensor basket. So within that field of view, the sensor is going to be able to pick up anything. So it's all about getting the missile into a place where its sensor will open up and the target will be within that basket. It's going to hugely increase your ability to destroy that target because it doesn't need to scan as much, right? There's all different types of scanning profiles and how these sensors find things. If it's right there in the heart of the sensor basket, right there, and it's, right there as you're staring at it, it makes it easier for it to find it and destroy it.
Gotcha. So basically these commands are going to send it so that when it opens its eye, its field of view has the target within it traditionally. Or if it has to turn its head left or right, like looking for your wife who's sneaking up, then that would be our field of regard, right? So basically either within the field of regard, which is bigger, or the field of view, which is just open your eye and there it is. You just stare and see it.
Yeah, that's the easier way of saying what I said, yeah.
No worries at all. So there are a couple other capabilities that this Link 16 provides to the weapon and really to the operator, right? So it has the ability also to abort the weapon, which is something new, and that would be post-launch, as well as it could command a retarget. So can you step us through that a little bit, either retargeting, obviously unclass, or aborting, JSOW?
Yeah, think about boats. Like, boats don't operate on their own. They're going to operate within close proximity to one another. There's lots of tactical reasons for it. There's lots of just common sense reasons to it. But yeah, boats are going to generally operate together. If you're launching these weapons, and generally you're launching a bunch of them, right? You're going to launch them in salvos. You're going to want these things to go to the same target. Well, a lot of these boats look alike. They're all made of metal. They all have some type of superstructure. To a weapon or to somebody that doesn't really know what they're looking for other than a boat. Like, I can tell the difference between a sailboat and a steamship, but I couldn't tell you anymore what the difference between different types of carriers or different types of destroyers. Yeah, they're all just boats, right? Some have sails, some don't. I'll call it good. So anyway, the weapon is the same way. It's going to go after the first one it finds that meets the criteria. So you may need to tell it, hey, you're going to the wrong one. You want to go ahead and you want to make sure it's going to the one that you wanted of that group. So that's kind of the retargeting side.
Nice. Okay. And then if you wanted to command an abort, obviously, as it's running down range, you just tell it, hey, knock it off. And it's not going to go schwack the target, right? It's just that easy. Mm-hmm. Staying on the unclassified side, obviously. Yeah. So, all right. Okay. So awesome. So we went through what is DT versus OT. We talked about the weapon itself, a little bit of lineage, right, with the A, the C, and then eventually the C1. So now let's get into our experiences flying together, and feel free just to totally open kimono, talk about all the things that I flubbered away and didn't do correctly. That is quite okay. I'm used to it, and I'm fully expecting it. But anyway, you and I got to fly some captive flight vehicles with JSOW, right?
Yeah. So
any good sea stories you want to start off with?
Yeah, dude, the time on deck sucked.
Okay, why is that? What would suck about just sitting on deck?
All right, so this is where I differed from a lot of people, because I guess I'm just old and grumpy towards the end. I was like, this is stupid. Let's not waste this money. Like, flight test is incredibly expensive. You have to pay for the range. You have to pay for the tracking. You have to pay for your controllers. You have to pay for your flight test engineers. You have to pay for usage of the airplane. These events get expensive quick. Your maintainers, contract or union maintenance, right? These things get expensive really quick. So you have to know what you're doing going into it. You're always pushing to get these things done. But by the end, I'll admit, I was just like, all right, this is stupid. Why are we wasting all this time? Why are we putting forth all this effort? We know we're not going to go today, whatever else. But anyway, point of the story being, it's in our nature. We don't like sitting on deck. Sitting on deck is bad. You're burning gas. You're getting hot. You can't pee while you're sitting on deck. It's just not a good thing to be, right?
Yeah.
I was always afraid I'd drop something. So even if I brought snacks, like, that didn't get broken out because I didn't want to screw it up before we went. So sitting on deck, not natural. The whole point is get out of the maintenance line, marshal up, where marshal is where all the planes get together, make sure you can all talk, and then you go off and go fly. Well, with net-enabled weapons, making sure you're able to talk means that the airplane can talk to the weapon, and other airplanes can talk to the weapon, and everybody can talk to each other, which means you have to all have the same crypto. Crypto being the special information that gets loaded into it that allows you to talk safely and know that nobody else is going to hear you or be able to spoof it or do anything else, right?
Okay,
you have your secure communications.
Okay, so thank you. Along lines of secure communications, so let's pretend that the JSOW is Wi-Fi enabled, right? Would it be kind of like a web key, but more complicated maybe? Or, a password?
It's going to be the stuff behind crypto is more like the stuff behind the scenes that you don't even know about as a user that has to happen for your computers to talk to the internet.
Okay, and just to make sure no one gets confused, cryptocurrency versus weapon crypto, right?
Yes. cryptographics, I guess. Crypto, we call it short for it's codes, it's algorithms, it's all the fancy stuff that, like the Enigma machine, right? Everybody knows the Enigma from World War II, where, we finally captured that and we're now able to read all the German messages. Same type of thing here. Without these specific crypto keys, you're not able to understand what's getting transmitted across, or the system may flat out reject it. It's a way of staying secure. But again, integration and interoperability. The weapon needs to talk to the airplane that it's on, and it needs to be integrated with it. And interoperable, it needs to be able to talk with all the other airplanes out there. So everybody needs to be on the same crypto. Everybody needs to be synced up. Link, like we said, is very dependent on time, which means everybody needs to have the same reference time. You would think you'd just get that from the GPS and you'd call it good because everybody's GPS enabled. Even then, it never quite worked out. So anyway, there's all these things that go into it to make sure that you're able to talk to one another. You got to make sure that you have, it's like a phone call, right? Of, hey, I want to talk. Let's say I wanted to talk to a missile named Fred, right? I need to call up Fred's specific phone number to talk to him. Same thing with these weapons. So you had to have the very specific phone numbers for all these guys, and he'd have to load all those in. So that was time consuming, prone to errors. Crypto, again, we're all learning this. The net-enabled weapons were new. So getting the crypto into the weapon and into the plane was always a challenge. So, dude, I just remember just sitting there for hours on deck, sweating to death, watching our time go, knowing that we need to get airborne because you have to do it over the water. You have to do it over the range for safety. So we're just watching that time go away and just trying to get these damn weapons just to stay in the network and just pushing buttons and then, talking on the radio. And the poor maintainers, I remember those dudes running back and forth between the aircrafts and canopies coming up and down, trying to talk to each other and get these things going. Oh, those were just, it was just miserable. And then you do that enough times and you cancel enough times. Now you got the program office breathing down your neck. Hey, when are you going to get testing done? Hey, when are you going to get testing done? I need to meet this milestone. Well, I need more time. Well, no, you're going to find a way to do it. So the pressure keeps on building. Man, I can't remember. We must have tried it 3 or 4 times before we actually went flying for real.
I'm with you, dude. And I'll tell you what. So we're sitting on deck. We're burning gas. We got better things to do than to let our boots heat up like that, right? So we're getting warm in the cockpit, obviously. But it seemed TOFU at the beginning very much like an ill-defined problem. So what I mean by that is we have all these variables, whether it be crypto or time division, multiple access, and all these things that could go wrong, right? And we really, real time, it's pretty darn hard to monitor them. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, troubleshooting was almost impossible. And it wasn't because we didn't know the technologies. Like you said, there's too many things that could go wrong. So to try to narrow it down became very hard. So you're like, okay, this didn't work. All right, let's bring the guy out and let's put the crypto keys back in. All right, well, was it on me or was it on the other airplane, right? I don't know where that broke. This other issue, I don't know what it is. There were just too many things that could be wrong, and there was no real way to figure that out. And the user interface in the aircraft was, again, not the friendliest thing to work with. Lots of punching in numbers, lots of just kind of pressing random buttons and scrolling between different pages. There wasn't much thought put into that because, again, we didn't really know what we were getting into. So, yeah, troubleshooting was near impossible.
So I'm with you. So yeah, if we can't monitor stuff, maybe it's at least we can't see stuff in the cockpit, and we do have telemetry, right? TM as we called it. So some of our super whammadine, I'll call them, captive flight vehicles would send additional information besides Link 16 out to the ground station, and they could monitor different data streams, we'll call it. But I mean, I don't know about you, man, but it was totally, I felt like in the beginning anyway, every flight was a voyage of discovery. All right, we're going to find something, we're going to run our head into this wall, and we're going to pound 3 times in the wall, maybe break through, maybe shut down and cancel, or, chronicle. But I mean, before I started the program, I didn't even know that the difference between GPS time and UTC, right? So GPS and versus Universal Time Constant or Zulu or Greenwich Time, whatever, is 18 seconds. So there's an 18-second difference between GPS time and UTC time, and the weapon's drawing GPS time and mission planning is, so all these things that I had no clue about. And so not only did I have to learn patience, as you mentioned earlier, right, but I had to learn all these other little litinoid trivia facts, if you will, that became I thought very consequential to making this weapon work.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so yeah, on deck time, kind of, for lack of a better term, it sucked, right? But let's pretend on the few flights that we did get it rocking and rolling on deck, we blast off out of China Lake, doing captive flight tests. Let's talk about captive flight tests over Whiskey 289. So that would be west of Point Magoo. How did those flights go?
Yeah, those were always an adventure. This was fun because these were integrated test flights, IT flights. So I was with a VX9 driver and you had a VX9 dude in your back seat.
Probably more, right? Good old Sean.
And a DT pilot versus an OT pilot have very different perspectives on how to get to a place and what to do once you're there and what's important. As in, do I need to be at point A at a very specific time, or does an ish count? So you got to learn real quick how to keep everybody on the same page, which again goes back to the briefing and doing it all. And like you said, a lot of things personality driven. So lots of cool coordinating and then dealing with the frustration when things don't work. You were the project engineer or the project officer. So you're like, did you try this? Did you try this? Because you're the expert on it, right? So all of a sudden we're hearing nonstop. And it's like, yeah, dude, like I wouldn't have called you if I had tried that. Like, come on, man, give me a break.
I'm sorry, dude. I know I did go transmit only sometimes, didn't I, on the radio?
Yeah. So we're sitting out there just orbiting over the water. It's kind of like, oh, look, there's Catalina. That looks cool. Did the thing work? No. All right, well, there's Catalina again. Look, kids, Big Ben, Parliament.
Totally, dude. Totally.
You're just flying these circles in the sky, and range is like, so you guys going to start or what?
Stand by.
The test team's on the radio too, and they're like, so you guys going to start or what? Because, man, project engineers, I absolutely love them, and the dudes working in there, and because they're seeing all that information, they're seeing the whole freaking matrix. So they're sitting there and they're like, why aren't you doing things?
Yeah, I'm with you, dude. So let's set the stage. So, okay, so you and I are up in two different aircraft, but we're a section, so we're a pair working together. We're obviously airborne and we're troubleshooting, so we're overhead the water. Where are these flight test engineers sitting in relation to us?
They're sitting in a control room at China Lake. And Point Magoo has a whole nother set of control rooms, and they are sending information back from Point Magoo to China Lake. And actually, I think for some of these tests, we had our dudes come out and sit in the range at Point Magoo as well.
Cool. And now, okay, so, and it's real-time comm, so if I bark something on the radio, they hear it right away, and vice versa.
Oh, yeah, and you're hot mic, so everybody hears everything that's going on. Hot mic being your microphone will just key and transmit as soon as it picks up some voice. There's no actual push to talk.
Okay, these guys are sitting in a windowless room, either at the lake or at Point Magoo, and they have giant screens in front of them. And what are they looking at on the screens?
They're looking at a couple of different things. One will generally be kind of the God's eye view, general map, and they'll see just like you see in the movies of the little deadly diamond moving across the screen, or the little staple moving across the screen with a number underneath of it. So they'll know, hey, that's Sunshine's airplane, or hey, that's TOFU's airplane. So they're kind of looking at that. They're also seeing what's around. The range is in coordination with ATC, air traffic control, because it's just a warning area. There's airlines. That area is, designated for that type of work, but airlines need to do their things, right? I mean, this is near Los Angeles. It's a very busy airspace. So you have to worry about the space that you're working in. You don't want to violate any airspace, altitude, and, distance. And so you're just sitting there tooling around. And the other thing the project engineers and test teams will have is, like you mentioned, they're seeing all the data raw. They're seeing it in hex. They're seeing it deep processed. They're seeing all types of strip charts and moving needles. It is right out of a movie, where they are just seeing anything and everything. And that's why I call it the matrix, because they're just looking at all this data and pulling out what's relevant. And they're trying to make decisions, because it's really a joint event where we're trying to accomplish things together. But what they don't have is the view in the cockpit. They may get some cameras or some video fed back to them, but they don't understand the decision making. They don't have the full situational awareness that we do in the airplane because they're in a windowless room somewhere else. So you get into that of like, how come you're not doing anything? How about now? How about now? Are we there yet? Are we there yet?
I was going to say, dude, shut up. So and you bring up a good point. So the interaction, right? So let's say I'm single seat for whatever reason. So I'm talking on the radio too, as opposed to a 2-seat there. And I learned the importance of delivery and inflection. So what I mean by that is, let's say the flight test engineer, FT, says to me, hey, Sunshine, can you check we had aircraft call signs, right? COSO 11, check this. And I'll be like, stand by, as in, hey, I'm probably doing something else, right? Or there's stand by, like I'm trying to figure it out. Or there's what hopefully didn't happen too often, stand by, right? And it's just like using your middle name with somebody, right? You're calling them by their middle name, like, listen to me, so so delivery is another nuance, we'll call it, that I thought was very important in flight test in comms. Would you agree?
Absolutely. The problem is then you get some people like Skipper Opie, who was another great skipper, Marine. He was out saying his voice never changed. It was always the same. Like his whole plane could have been on fire and it still would have been like, yeah, I got a problem. I'm coming back. Like that was just his demeanor in the aircraft. So yeah, getting that inflection there really, really meant something when it came over the radio. Yeah.
Oh, I'm with you, dude. And that, I think for Opie Rothamel, right, that just is a trademark of the ideal test aircrew. You know what I'm saying? Like he was just that good, So definitely times where my personality failed, we'll call it, and I went from sunshine to perhaps supernova or solar flare, at least. So I tried to watch that and minimize that. But okay, so we would do these range hops, right? It's all captive flight, so nothing's falling off the jet. So you mentioned proximity to LA. Okay, so we did our captive flight events, and let's say they all went well, and now it's game day. It's time for a live fire. First thing is, what kind of prep do we go through, and how worried are we about people driving up and down I-5 or the highway, close to the coast?
Very concerned about all that type of stuff. There's a reason we're doing it all over water, and not just because we're going after boats, right? That's the most obvious reason to do it over water. We have target boats out there. Well, those target boats are being towed by somebody, right? There's somebody in front of them. So lots of deconfliction needs to be done just on that. But let's even take that step back. Threat hazard analysis is one of the big things that we did in the test community, called them THAs. So when you first write your test plan, one of the very first things you do, a test plan is a document that goes all the way up the chain for all types of signatures by both the chief test pilot and the chief test engineer. If a range is involved, they'll sign it as well. And it talks all about the procedures, what you're trying to do, why you're trying to do it. Again, having that context is extremely important because you need to know real time when you have to make decisions what you're trying to accomplish. Knowing the intent, very important. So anyway, point of story being, you come up with this test hazard analysis. You're identifying all the things that could go wrong. Something falling off the aircraft, the missile not behaving the way you expect it to. You identify all the possible hazards and the causes of those. So things falling off the aircraft it could hit somebody and harm them and injure them, right?
And oh, by the way, TOFU, it happens often enough that we do have an acronym for that, don't we?
TFOA, things falling off aircraft. Yep.
Crazy enough. And have you ever had to report a TFOA?
No, but I was the duty officer one day when an airplane came back without an AIM-9. And so I'm sitting at the duty desk, and it was one of those rare duty desks where you actually have a window.
Oh.
And so you can watch them come in. So, you kind of turn around just to wave or moon them or whatever else as they're coming back into the line. And it was, hey, didn't you guys have 2 wingtips? Yeah, why?
My bad.
Yeah. So, and that actually turned out part of it had failed. We still did all the good training and everything else afterwards. But yeah, kicked off all types of investigations and sitting people down, and yeah. But anyway, point of the story being, you go through these hazard analysis where you find the hazards, the causal effects, and then you come up with mitigations. You throw all that into a matrix, and based off the matrix, you determine a risk level for your event or a hazard level for your event. Based off of that, you then have to go through certain other criteria and reviews. Whenever you're launching a weapon downrange, you have to do a fire readiness review, an FRR. This is where you bring a huge group of people together. There's lots of discussions, lots of prep for it. The FRR is just the meeting at the end where you all come together, you all agree on these are our processes and our mitigations, and this is what we're going to do to make sure nobody gets hurt.
Gotcha. So the THAs, when you talk about that, so one thing would be, what if JSAL just went stupid and decided to head toward LA instead of one of the remotely controlled targets? What could we affect? What could we do to that weapon prior to it hitting land?
So the first thing is, hey, when you pickle it or you pull the trigger, you're going to be pointing away from the coast, right? But yeah, if it starts to do that turn, if it starts to go some direction, you're going to have some type of self-destruct on it or commanded destruct system.
And those folks, so the range safety folks that control that, right, destroying a test item, do they sit right next to the FTEs, the flight test engineers? Are they in their own space? Do you know how that works?
I honestly don't know.
Oh, sorry. So it turns out they're in the same building, but think of Apollo 13, something, big old NASA construct where you got a whole bunch of rows and rows of computers, right? So you got the FTs on kind of one area, in one area. And in the range safety, at least what I've seen in the past, is they're kind of outside of throwing distance, yelling distance, earshot, if you will, in the same room, but away from the FTs, because their sole focus is to watch the display that you mentioned earlier that represents the aircraft, the launching aircraft, and ideally the test item will also transmit via telemetry, right, a TM of its position, and they'll just watch it for getting close to the range boundaries. And if it does get close, you're absolutely right, they'll destroy it.
I also did harm launch. I launched an ARGM. So first ARGM off the A18G. So it was my first flight. It was my first test flight of 31. I'd been there like 2 weeks. And sure enough, the aircrew that were supposed to do it were not EA 18G qualified.
Okay.
And they're like, hey, we want to have somebody EA 18G qualified in there to do this, to use the systems in the back. It's not a straightforward push one button and go. So because of that, you have to have certain qualifications. And generally, brand new guys to the squadron don't have it. But because it was my second test tour, I had all the qualifications. So I'm sitting there at my hail and bell, where you're welcome to the squadron for the first time, and they're complaining like, we don't have anybody to do this event. They're like, we don't know how we're going to get this on time. Whatever else. I said, I'll do it. I'm like, what do you mean you'll do it? Like,
nice.
You're new, kid. I'm like, I'm not really new, man. Like, I've got this, and this.
You're an old new guy.
Oh, no. Yeah. They're like, no shit. So
favorite line in the Navy.
So they're like, all right, we have to get you qualified. So like I did all of my, when you check into the squadron, you have to get your FAM flights, your familiarization flights, you have to get your range flights, you have to get all these qualifications before whatever. I got those done in like 3 days. Like I was the priority on the flight schedule, flying twice a day. Yeah, it was fantastic. So anyway, that was my first week in the squadron. I was flying a missile. So I had to do an FRR on like my 4th day in the squadron. And I had to get up to speed real quick with the team and discuss things and talk about what we can do in the airplane to make sure that these things aren't going to happen. And when we were doing it over the ground range, in that case, the self-destruct was right next to the lead of the test event. So you had the lead test event sitting just to the right was range safety, and then off to the left and down in the corner were the dudes staring at the matrix. So you had a very different roles and responsibilities for that test team. You had a group that was there to make sure the system was working and get your lessons learned. And then you had another set of, hey, we need to make sure this works right, because again, we're doing it over land. And even though you're in the middle of nowhere and very restricted areas, there's still always a whole nother set of hazards when you're trying to launch things over land.
Dude, I'm totally with you. Okay, so, and you know what? You bring up a good point. I got some live fires also, both with Argum over the land, and then as well as Harpoon 2 Plus, another network-enabled weapon. But before we digress into more fireside chats, we'll call it, about live fires, thinking back to JSOW, so we're back on the C test range, right, west of LA. And besides it running into the city, which we don't want, we talked about the strategy to mitigate that. How about what if there's a lone surfer or fishing vessel or something out there on the range? How do we detect that? What do we do? What's kind of the procedure or protocol there?
Yeah, so they put out a thing called Notice to Mariners. Kind of like in aviation, we have Notice to Airmen, NOTAMs. They have the same thing on that side, and they tell boats, hey, you guys need to stay out of this area at this time. So scheduling is always a pain in the ass, right? Because you can only have so many people in the range at one time. You can only do it during certain times of the day because of air traffic control. You can only do it during certain times of day because of shipping lines. Trying to get range time is always a challenge. But yeah, if somebody decides, hey, I'm going to go sailing today, and they're in there, you got to wait until they get cleared out. And it's funny because they'll launch another boat out a couple hours before time that will go and kind of clear the area. BX-30 is another test squadron at Point Mugu. They have range clearing aircraft that will go out there and they'll yell at people over the radio to tell them, hey, get out of the way because we're about to send things downrange. But it's up to those people if they want to leave or not. You can't really make them. So again, talking about being stuck on deck, I think I was stuck on deck with you one day, or no, we didn't even walk to the airplane because the sea state was too high where they couldn't send out that clearing boat because it's just a little rubber boat. And these guys are going way out there. And they're just like, yeah, we can't go out today. Like, dude, it's beautiful. Like, you're kidding me. So all those are issues you have to go into. And then all that comes back to your fuel state. You only got so much fuel on the plane. Maybe you got a tanker, maybe you didn't. Maybe your pilot's qualified and able to hit the tanker. Maybe he's not, or maybe it's been a while since he's done it. You run into all those types of fun issues too.
Oh, I'm with you, dude. And so thinking of sea state, also because JSOW works in the IR, which is unclassified, you have to worry about clouds, right, between the weapon and the target itself. So there's a lot of game day, we'll call it atmospherics, that can cancel. And those range times are bought and paid for, right, ahead of time. So you could basically, and it's very odd. I don't understand. It's my simple brain, but basically one government organization will pay another government organization to use said airspace or water space test range. And the bill that I saw for one test event, just for the sea range, right, which includes the people working in the computers and the FTEs on range control, as well as range safety, it was about $350,000 for a range period.
Yep.
So imagine being canceled for weather. I mean, talk about a letdown, huh?
If you get canceled for weather, you get some of that money back, but not all of it. Canceling an event is a big deal because everybody has to still get paid some amount. Yeah.
Yeah. Now imagine, take that idea of canceling, getting some amount back. That's for weather. Now, what if you have that interloper? You have that fishing trawling vessel out there that's basically just in the way and you have a red range, right? I don't know if they get the money back.
No.
So it's just
you're committed at that point.
Yeah, it's just kind of tough, man. So with live fires, you've been on a couple, I've been on a couple. The stress level goes up, wouldn't you say, from just a captive flight?
Absolutely.
But you have rehearsed it so well, and we have a contingency to a contingency. So we have a backup plan to the backup plan to the backup plan. So sometimes for a live fire, if I'm the releasing aircraft, we'll call it, I'll have two weapons, one on each, a test item on each side of my aircraft, even though I'm only going to release one. Or in our case, where we were IT, I believe that sometimes you guys would carry weapons also, right?
That's correct. Yeah, but either airplane could have been the launcher. Yep. And that was, one of our degraded, hey, if all this goes wrong, we can let these other guys do it. Yeah.
Yeah. And another great opportunity, I thought, besides dropping the weapon on a live fire, was being photo chased. Did you ever do that?
Oh, photo chase was always a good time. Yeah, okay, so I absolutely love photo chase.
Yeah. So let's talk about, I've chased a Tomahawk cruise missile as well as just a JSOW. I guess that's really about it. How about you? What are some of your photo chase experiences?
So I guess photo chase isn't the right word. I'm trying to think of what the word would be. We did a lot of envelope expansion when I was at 23. So you have an aircraft that's going to have to go and do very specific turns and very specific maneuvers. So you send a chase aircraft, photo chase, we just called it chase, that would go out there and fly with them. And as the wingman, you're providing another safety valve in the risk mitigations out there. So we did that a bunch. In the Prowler, we were getting a new chaff and flare system. We upgraded to the LE39, or we upgraded from the 39 to the 47, ALE 47, which everybody else had. I think 39 was made in like the 30s. But anyway, point of the story being, you had to have somebody there because you had to watch these things come out. So figuring out your position, everything else. And again, like you said, we had flown that flight 3 or 4 times before we actually did it. So that when you get to it, the stress level is a little bit reduced because, again, it's, okay, I've done this 10 times already. We know exactly what's going on. We've what-ifed it to death. We have our THA. But yeah, the pucker factor definitely goes up when you're doing it for real.
Totally agree. And if you mind, so as we talked earlier about ARGM, your ARGM experience, so Harpoon 2 Plus, I know we didn't anchor on it, and I'm not going to anchor on it right now, but it's another network-enabled weapon, and Harpoon, it's a derivative of, or let me say the origins for the Harpoon 2 Plus are the Harpoon Block 1C. So it's a powered weapon, right? So think of it as it's a missile. It's an anti-ship missile. And now we added that data link into it. So instead of going after a point that's pre-programmed into the weapon prior to release, now you can run the weapon down range and you can update the target location so it can adjust its course and eventually opens its eye. Ideally, it's going to see the target within its field of view, and then it can prosecute. So all we're trying to do is get it via Link 16 to the sensor basket, as we mentioned earlier. All right. All that being said, it's a Boeing effort. I am the lead test pilot for this Boeing effort. We're out in Whiskey 289, so we're west of LA. Same kind of safety issues we have to worry about. Now, this weapon has a motor to it, so it goes even further. So we're worried more about it, being stupid and running off toward downtown LA. So we have all the risk mitigation in place. It's the first event, and this is I think a $1.5 million test asset. So kind of a big deal, right? The guys from Boeing St. Louis come down. They come down. Boeing guys, the executive, the leaderships, the C-level officers, right? They come down to Point Magoo. We blast off out of China Lake. We get our weapons checks and all that. Everything's looking good. We got our target out there, which is a remotely controlled boat. And believe it or not, we're actually going to face east. So we're going to be pointing toward the coastline when we shoot. And I won't get into the specifics, but that's what was required for this test event. So the Boeing guys are down. They're in the FTE bay. They're watching on the displays. They're actually, this time we have cameras in the cockpit so they can see our displays and all that. Plus they have the map overlay. Everything's looking good. This is what we call a tactically representative shot. So it's at a very tactical altitude and tactical airspeed. So it's a lot of fun. That's all I'm going to say without breaking any numbers, out. And everything's looking good. We fire the weapon. And this is one of the weapons, its engine start after launch. So basically drops away from the aircraft and then starts the motor and trundles down range. It's running down range, and via Link 16, it's giving me status updates right in the cockpit. So we're watching, and I kid you not, TOFU, it was about 7 seconds after launch that I looked down, and the missile reports that it has basically cut off propulsion, and the rudder has gone hard over. So the control surfaces stopped working. So I'm like, hey, range, I'm showing some bad signs from the weapon. Can you confirm that the test asset is still airborne? And there's this pause. And then there's this longer pause. And they said, and the inflections we talked about earlier, like, stand by. And it was more of the big question mark, right? And I'm like, dude, we need to know now. So it's like, come on back, status. And sure enough, unfortunately, range safety had accidentally blown up the weapon. Oh. So what had happened is about 7 seconds after launch of this premier inaugural Harpoon 2 Plus $1.5 million test asset, range safety had accidentally shot it in the head, basically into the water it went. So let's say Boeing had a 3-ring circus ready, a big cake. You know, the clowns were there. It was going to be great. And instead it turned out just to be a clown show. So we get back and land in Magoo. We go back to this, no kidding, big room, very, with large screens, very executive, you know, mahogany desks and all that very fancy stuff. And what we were hoping for was all the fanfare, the pomp and circumstance you'd expect. The press corps was there, all that stuff. And instead it turned into just the key players in the room. We're gonna leave everyone out. So leave everyone else out of the room. Go eat the cake if you want, but the rest of us don't have an appetite right now. Anyway, so unfortunately, you know, there was some human error, and I couldn't cast a stone without saying that I've had my errors too. Fortunately, they didn't culminate in such a high visibility failure, but these things do happen. So, you know, TOFU, we put all these risk mitigation, into place. And at the end of the day, we're all human. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. Yeah. I got another interesting one.
Yeah, go for it.
So we do something called LFEs, large force exercises, towards the end of some of these major blocks. So we'll have, 20 some aircraft, multiple squadrons. Actually, I think we were over 30 airplanes because we had a fleet squadron there. We had a couple fleet F-18 squadrons. We had the E-2 doing some stuff. We had the Growlers going, Super Hornets. I forget what the event was. It was just some giant LFE. Stupid early in the morning. It's like the second day or whatever else, right? So when you have this many people in Point Magoo, that's where we're doing it. Everybody was spread over base. There was no one specific ready room. So I was flying with a different squadron. I was a guest on one of their planes. So I had to go over to their spaces. So they were borrowing spaces from one of the UAV groups that was out there. Well, they don't come into work until like 8 or 9. It's 6 o'clock in the morning, and our flight gear's locked up in one of the offices. So we're trying to call anybody and their brother. We try calling security. Nobody's answering because it's like 6. It's not even 6 in the morning yet, right? We've already briefed. Everything else is going. We're getting ready for this. Next thing I know, we're breaking into this building, right? We got one dude who's got the drill out. The maintainer's trying to take the doorknob off. We got another dude taking a crowbar out back, trying to get the window up. Finally gets the window just enough that we got the one skinny, tiny dude in. He jumps in, unlocks the door. He gets us in there so we can start putting on all our flight gear and everything else. We're running out to the jet. We're really late. We can see, aircraft are starting to taxi all over the place. We're like, dude, we're really late. We're going through this as fast as we can, getting up there, getting into position. I mean, these large force exercises, the coordination is ridiculous, right? Because you have to park all these airplanes in places that you don't normally want. And again, this was like the first or second day. So again, humans trying to figure this out. These are controllers that have probably never done it before in their life, trying to drive people all over the base, get people to where they want to be. You have some people on the runway, everything else. And sure enough, so we finally get in. Life is looking good. Everybody's doing the check-ins. We're doing the roll call. We're starting to feel cool, right? LFEs get that. You get in that tactical mindset again of, COSO 1-1 up and ready, go and get the net-enabled weapons. We're like, woohoo, it's all green. Life is good. We're going. And they're like, okay, all of a sudden the ground comes up and they're like, all aircraft on the runway taxi. Like they didn't even call it specific. They're like, everybody get off the runway now. A P3 was coming back on an emergency landing. One of their 4 engines wasn't working. So here they come back. They're coming back on their emergency landing, and they knock the gear out of barrier.
Oh! As in, what do you mean by gear?
So they always have the arresting gear up. Much like you have the arresting gear on the carrier, you have arresting gear on the runways as well. And that way, if there's an emergency, you drop your hook and you don't have to, you don't have to taxi along. You'll just stop. So sure as shit, we're all sitting out there now, and we're just watching the time burn away because people actually have to go out there and do it. So again, stupid early in the morning, don't have all the people you need. All right, people get somebody out there to fix all this. You got to reset everything. Now you have aircraft that are spread out all over the airport. Like they diverted people all the way to the far end. Well, an airport's not small, right? And you can only taxi at a walking speed. So now you got to get all these aircraft that they don't move backwards, right? So you got to taxi the long way around. And sure enough, finally the dude just comes over and he's like, event's canceled. Like we ran out of time. Yeah, it was brutal, but it was one of those days where everything went to pot real quick. We were rushing, we were getting ready, but everything was starting to work. And then all of a sudden at the end, yeah, no.
Dude, and you had the mission critical waistline, right? You had the skinny dude. You were able to push through the window to get
exactly.
Man,
yeah, dude, we found every workaround you could, and then of course we had to answer the questions later from the base skipper of why were you breaking into? Because security got a call saying, "Hey, somebody's trying to break into this office space." Yeah, it was.
Oh, dude.
Why is there no doorknob on this door anymore? Oh, yeah, there were all types of questions being asked.
Destruction of government property, but it was in pursuit of a mission. So, dude, I'm so with you. So speaking of human error, so I know I bagged on range safety earlier for Harpoon 2+, but here's a mea culpa, right? Here's one that I porked, unfortunately. So Waldo and I are at Point Magoo. We're going to launch an ARGM against a seaborne target that had an emitter. Right. So, and it's a section. So there's another guy out there. So basically 2 aircraft, each aircraft has a missile. We're going to both fire them off at the same time. But instead of just being straight and level, we have to have it's a certain test point. So it has to be under G. So we're in a maneuver at a certain altitude and airspeed. So sure enough, we get fixed into our position. We pull, if you will. So we maneuver the aircraft to get into the G regime, we'll call it.
Yeah, you're kind of lofting. Right, you were trying to do a lofted shot, I think it was called.
Well, yeah, so let's just kind of keep it on class. So anyway, so we're doing something. We're kind of doing a zzz. Yeah, we're gonna zing it, okay? So that's a technical term, by the way. But anyway, so we're gonna zing this thing, right, or sling it. Let me use that. We're gonna sling this thing in section, and it's gonna schwack this target at a certain range. Well, sunshine here, guy in the front, right? I'm pulling G's. Anyway. Basically, there's a breakdown in the cockpit between the front and the back, and I'm gonna own this one. And when I go to pickle the weapon, or basically pull the trigger, we'll call it, right? I had messed up the switches, and I get a hang fire. Oh. So for those at home, a hang fire means basically think of a gun. You know there's a bullet in the chamber. You pull the trigger, and nothing happens. So it kind of jams, right? But except this is now a multi-million-dollar missile that has been commanded to fire, but yet it's still sitting on my wing. So, as you can imagine, so Point Magoo is not right next to LA, but there's civilization nearby. So we tell the FTs on deck, hey, we got a hang fire. We're going to execute the procedures. As usual, we have contingencies, and we have contingencies to contingencies. Anyway, so we come back and land, and now I have this weapon that I've told to run down range, but it's still hanging on my jet. And my jet no longer can talk to it because it basically severed the data link, we'll call it, right, the connection. So there's this big question mark both in my cockpit, as well as the jet. It doesn't know the status of this missile that's been told to fire. And there's a whole sequence to a missile launch, right, where it's going to basically activate a battery, and then the battery is going to activate the lugs that release it from the jet, and then it's going to start the motor. So we don't know where in the sequence that thing got kind of foobarred, right, or flubbered. So now I come back and I land. I told Tower I have a hang fire missile. I'm going to execute the procedures. And they said, copy, just go, execute procedures. Well, the Tower's idea of what the procedures were and my idea of what the procedures were, they were slightly different. So, and if you can think of Point Magoo, we land heading toward the water, right? Runway 21, I believe, heads out toward the water. So I'm thinking this is pretty safe. If I land and it jars the missile loose and it runs down on the ground, it's just going to go out into the beach. It might surprise some tourists and then make a big splash. No big deal. Well, it doesn't. It stays with me. Now, Tower says, follow the truck that's to your left. So I look over, and you guys have probably seen at airfields, they have follow me trucks, right? It quite literally, on the back of the truck, there are flashing amber lights on top, and on the back it says, follow me. So I thought, okay, I'm going to follow him. So I looked to my left, and the guy has pulled up right next to me. So now we're neck and neck. So I'm off the runway. I'm on the taxiway. And it looks like the truck and I are basically at the starting line, right? So I look over, and I can't talk to the truck, but I can talk to Tower. And truck can't talk to me, but the truck can talk to Tower. So there's this disconnect. And I'm like, okay, well, this truck, hey, Tower, I'm ready to follow the follow me truck. And what I didn't realize is the truck driver knows that I have this missile that we don't know the status of. So it doesn't want to get in front of me because it's afraid the missile's going to launch off and blow up his truck, which I didn't realize at the time, but now makes sense. So basically, I keep, we call it the Helen Keller, right? I keep throwing these weird signals in my hands like, dude, I'm going to follow you. And I point to get in front of the jet so I can follow you. And the guy keeps shaking me off or waving me off with his head, just kind of giving me the no signal. So we do this for a little bit. And finally, I'm getting pretty annoyed, being impatient as I am. And this is kind of one of those personality failures that we talked about earlier. So sunshine turns to solar flare. And I look over and I'm like, tower, I am unable to comply. This follow me truck will not get in front of me, so I cannot follow it. And the tower says, stand by. And then I ask again. And then I get the inflection, right? Stand by. So now I'm pissing off tower. And I'm like, you know what? Forget it. I'm just going to do my procedures that I know. And so I call it angry throttle. But I basically jammed the throttle up almost in the afterburner right next to the truck. And the jet lunged forward, if you will. The truck decided he was just going to turn and go away. And I went to the end of the taxiway and I waited my requisite 5 minutes or whatever for the battery to run out of energy. And then the missile was considered safe. But the whole point of that was I screwed up. Had I done the release properly, obviously I wouldn't have had this personality failure where I can't talk to the guy in the truck. The guy in the truck doesn't want to get in front of me. So there's this giant miscommunication, which led sunshine to become solar flare. So anyway, that's my Argom story.
Yeah. So now, those are all kind of big, drastic, funny stories. How many times have you forgotten to turn on the recording? How many times have you forgotten, like, all of a sudden you'll do the same flight 20 times, but today you're going to be in a different radar mode. And there's one little line that says that you always step over because you've done the flight 20 times and you get back. Yes. And they're like, so how did the flight go? Oh, everything was great. It's just like always. Well, it shouldn't have. Oh, no.
I did. Oh, yeah. And like we said earlier, those ranged, the whole evolution is expensive, right?
Yep.
And so, yeah, man, humble pie, right? TOFU, humble pie. I had plenty of opportunity for humble pie, which hopefully turned out to make me more gracious when other guys screwed up, or as a dad when my kids screw up. You know what I'm saying? Like, try not to be so hard on them. So
yeah, and I mean, and you have to fess up. You can't cover it up. You can't hide about it. No, you can't lie about it. You have to be like, yep, I screwed up. We didn't do this. Because if you try to cover it up, they're going to use that data. It's going to show something that's not right. It's going to cause all these other issues. So that honesty and that integrity is so important.
Dude, it is. And there's no incognito mode, we'll call it, right, for you guys. There's no way to hide the data. So it's you can't erase the history. It's always going to be there. So yeah, you might as well fess up. And that's a great point to segue, if you will, for lessons learned, TOFU. So, we talked about the weapon. We talked about the architecture that is NavAir. We talked about our flights together. So lessons learned. What were your big picture takeaways from captive and live fires that you kind of still use and maybe adhere to today?
Always bring snacks. There is, and I say that half jokingly, right? So I can't tell you how many times I've been out in that 289 area where something's gone wrong, be it time-wise, be it whatever, and we have to go and get gas out at, what was it, Catalina? Not Catalina.
San Clemente.
San Clemente, thank you.
Yep,
so you have to divert to San Clemente, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you go in and you hit the hot pits. The hot pits meaning you don't shut down the aircraft, you just shut down one engine, and they're able to fuel you while you're doing that. But you have to sit there and wait for them to get that process going. You have to sit there and wait for the aircraft to fuel. Then you have to sit there and wait for, turning all your systems back on. These things get long. So when you go out to do those events, these aren't just, your standard 1.4, 1.5. These are generally your 3-hour events. You're going to lag a 3.0. Well, now if you add in a delay, it gets up to about a 5.0, right? So you're out there a long time, and that's your flight time, not all your on deck time too, right? So you got to make sure you have your pedal packs, and you got to make sure you have snacks, because the last thing you want is a grumpy pilot. And no kidding, I had a bag of M&Ms. Normally I tried to minimize what I took into the cockpit because I'm a klutz. But sure enough, and my pilot, he was just getting grumpy. And I was like, dude, are you just hungry or something? He's like, dude, I'm starving. I was like, I got a bag of M&Ms, so I was able to toss that up to him over to, from the aft into the front. But yeah, that is always a lesson that's stayed with me. And I joke about seeing us next, but it's always be prepared. And I don't mean to sound like a Boy Scout or anything else. But when we talk about the THAs and kind of everything we talked about, was we what ifed everything. And again, this is, I think, a naval aviation thing. What could go wrong? And it's something that we really did in the test community, and we made sure we covered it all. And then we worked together with all of the assets we had available, with the other flight test engineers that are out there, with the test teams, with the range teams. We worked with all these people to come together to execute to the best option, and we were always prepared for whatever that next option is. So that's the one thing I've always taken out of it is what if things to death. Just always be prepared for what could go wrong. Think about it. Do that hazard analysis. Do that risk analysis. Know what you're getting yourself into and be ready for it. And then the integrity part of it. To me, those are the two biggest things that I got out of the test.
Yeah, I'm with you. And along those lines, being part of a team. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I ragged on the range safety guys earlier, and then I also busted on myself for the ARGM screw up. But both days, it wasn't one individual that failed. It was the test team,
yep.
Right? Whether I be airborne and I flew my best jet ever on profile, on step kind of thing, ready to launch, and then the test item blew up, I still took it personally as part of my fault. So I didn't get personally or individually angry at range safety. It was, okay, guys, here's a failure. We don't want it to define ourselves, right, or our team, mm-hmm. but we want to learn from it. So you're right. There were times, man, when the chips were down and we just got kicked in the teeth, right? Like losing that asset when the three-ring circus mm-hmm. is waiting for you back at, and it just turns into a clown show. But things like that, yeah, I'm with you. The integrity piece, because you can train a guy to fly, you can train a guy to push a button at a certain altitude, airspeed, on flight conditions. But if you can't trust the guy at that age, you can't teach him integrity. So I am 110% with you on that, TOFU. Cool. Well, at TOFU, I sincerely enjoyed this time we had together. It was a great trip down memory lane for me. I hope you feel about the same. Yeah, definitely. I hope I didn't bore you too much. No, not at all. I thought it was fun. Good. I tried to bring back my radio voice. It's been a while, so I'm sorry if I chipmunked on you a bunch here too. No, it's all about just kind of straight from the heart, and however it comes out, it comes out. You know what I'm saying? So mm-hmm. I really appreciate your time. I think the folks at home are going to enjoy this. And do you have any parting shots? Wow, I wasn't prepared for that question out of everything we just talked about. Again, thanks for this opportunity. I'm glad to be a part of this. I wish you absolute success on this. You're the perfect person to bring all this together between your network, your personality, your experience, and your breadth of knowledge. It's this absolutely awesome endeavor for you, and I'm wishing you the best and enjoy as you go through this. Awesome. Thank you, TOFU. Yeah, I was just, when we came up with this idea of weapons developmental test, honestly, you were the first guy I thought of, because even though we didn't touch on all of our flights together, we kind of focused on JSAL, but we've had some good ones, man. And thank you for what you taught me in the fleet. I was a single seat guy. So basically remove the bravado. I tried to always stay away from that, but I was used to doing everything in the plane, right? And I remember our first couple of flights, I wasn't good at sharing the task load. That was my button, man. That was my button. Whether it be the radar altimeter or changing a radio frequency. And you were very patient with me in helping me to better understand the crew concept and how 1 + 1 = 2. Excuse me, 2, as opposed to 1 + 1 = 1 or just 1. So, dude, I sincerely appreciate that. So awesome, man. Well, thank you very much for your time. And just as we wrap up here, so post-retirement, because you did your 20 years, you served very honorably. We talked about your accolades in the beginning. What are you up to these days, TOFU? I now work for a company called STC, Strategic Technology Consultant. We are model-based system engineering experts. So we're bringing MBSE
to the masses, for lack of a better term. And digital engineering, it's a whole new way of doing systems engineering, whole new way of doing development. In 2018, the DoD mandated that everybody starting new programs go with this digital engineering. And we are one of the finest firms to help people do that. So we work with a variety of civilian and government customers, helping them improve their processes. Before that, I worked in a startup. So I worked for a company called Virgin Hyperloop for a little bit, and I was a system integration and engineering manager over there. So it was really cool to be able to go from the large government acquisitions world to a startup environment and to see the differences and a lot of the similarities too.
Awesome, TOFU. Well, thanks again, man. I appreciate it, and have a great day.
Thanks, Shine. You too, brother.
Thanks for listening to Test Pilot on Authentic.